So if you're the kind of person who's willing to examine your own beliefs, you're not so identified with them that you defend them as if they were yourself. My approach is to have this, despite being pretty arrogant in a lot of ways, one way that I try not to be arrogant is to think that I'm infallible, because I know that I do stupid things all the time out of ignorance and confusion. I know I've got a lot of stupid ideas, and the problem is I don't know which ones they are. Hey guys, I want to show you something really interesting, okay? I'm going to turn this camera around, show you something really interesting. Take a look. Take a look at that. What do you see? Not down low, but up high. What do you see up there? You're looking at a major commercial flight traffic corridor. You're looking at a place where big jets fly way up high pretty constantly. They're hard to see today. They're hard to see in the summer. What do you notice about the sky? What I notice is there's no chemtrails, there's no contrails, there's no white lines in the sky. And that's the case for most of the summer here in Northern California, where we have what's called a Mediterranean climate, which means that it's dry and warm in the summer. All right, there's one. Can you see it right in the center of the screen? That is a commercial airliner flying super high in the sky. And it's leaving a contrail, but the contrail is fading almost instantly. Why is that? What's going on? Why is the sky in Northern California clear of chemtrails for basically 6 months of the year, the entire summer? You barely have any kind of chemtrail. If they were spraying us to fight global warming, wouldn't they be spraying us in the middle of summer when it's dry, clear, and hot? Throughout the winter, we see chemtrails all the time. Why would they only be spraying us in winter when it's cool and already often cloudy because it's our rainy season? Why would they only spray us then if they're fighting global warming? Or the other theory that we hear a lot is that they're trying to poison us and poison the land. So why would they spray Northern California only for half of the year, which would give our bodies a chance to recover? If they're trying to poison us, shouldn't they be spraying us all the time? Wouldn't it be cheaper and more effective to introduce poison into some other mechanism that didn't require constant high altitude jets flying and spraying? Couldn't they just bioengineer some kind of virus to hurt everybody? All you have to do is spritz it into the air in a crowd, and then it does the rest all by itself. As the old talk show host Arsenio Hall used to say, things that make you go, Let me ask you something. Are you the kind of person who is willing to examine your beliefs, take a second look at your beliefs, hear new information, and compare it with your previous belief and test it to see if that belief is really true now that new information has come to you? That's what I want to do in this video. I want to give you some information for you to consider about chemtrails. And what I'm not trying to do is take away the idea that there is corruption and malfeasance going on at a grand scale in our society, or that there are criminal conspiracies operating from some deep state Department of Defense, perhaps, arena in our society, in some sectors of government, that there isn't corruption and criminal conspiracy. I'm not trying to take those beliefs away from you, because I believe that those things are true. We do have a problem with corruption in the United States, just like every other country on the planet. I don't know of a civilization, of a nation that doesn't have corruption. It's not like the problem is whether we have corruption or not. The problem is how well do we keep it quarantined? I don't think we're ever going to get rid of it because it's human nature. I do agree with you guys that there are criminal conspiracies. I believe there's a deep state, a hidden cabal, or multiple hidden cabals in our country, in every other country. And these folks have a tremendous amount of power, and they don't have the interests and welfare of the masses in mind. They have themselves in mind. They have their own wealth and pleasure and power in mind. And that's what they're going for. And they're willing to hurt other people to get there. But are chemtrails real? I think it's an important thing to think about because we know that it's common practice in counter espionage, the kind of stuff that our CIA and other three-lettered agencies do as a professional day of work. They will distract and divide people. They will muddy the waters. They will put up smoke screens and diversions. They will create a problem over here, a fake problem, so that you don't see the real problem over here. When they make the fake problem over here, you're looking over here at this, and you're not seeing the other problem, the real problem that they're trying to hide from you. So are chemtrails real? Or is it a manufactured conspiracy designed to divide our attention away from things that really need it? Other criminal conspiracies that are real that we need to address, but we're not because we're putting that much attention onto chemtrails. So if you're the kind of person who's willing to examine your own beliefs, you're not so identified with them that you defend them as if they were yourself. If you're the kind of person that defends beliefs as if they are what you are, all I can say is you better be perfect. Because if you can't let anyone reach you with new information, you better never make mistakes. If you do make mistakes and yet you refuse to let anyone correct you, then you're going to be stuck with your mistakes your entire life. This is why my approach is to have this, despite being pretty arrogant in a lot of ways. One way that I try not to be arrogant is to think that I'm infallible. If someone wants to give me feedback, personal criticism, I'm all ears for it because I know that I do stupid things all the time out of ignorance and confusion. I know I've got a lot of stupid ideas, and the problem is I don't know which ones they are. Whether my beliefs are real or whether they are unreal, they all feel real, even the ones that aren't real. And so I try to have this intellectual humility where I remain open to new information permanently for my entire life about all of my beliefs. Doesn't mean I'm going to believe everything someone tells me. And if someone contradicts a belief of mine, they need to show me why my belief is wrong. There needs to be some evidence there, not just, I just believe it really strongly that you're wrong. Great. I believe it really strongly that I'm right because I really investigated deeply before I decided to believe in this particular thing. I investigated and tried to look at both sides of the story before I chose to start believing this. Just because someone else disbelieves it doesn't mean I'm going to adopt their viewpoint unless they have evidence to show me, because I build my beliefs on evidence as much as possible. And that's what I did with chemtrails. I started out believing in them. It seemed obvious. I mean, I'm looking around and I'm seeing chemtrails, and I only see them sometimes. And, when I looked into it, I was just finding a lot of arguments why they're real. But then in my research, I came across a pilot who started addressing all of the arguments of chemtrails. And then I would take one of his arguments and I would research it independently of him and spend some time looking at it from all different angles. And I would be like, okay, well, he was right about that. And then I'd look at taking his next argument and I would research that. I'd be like, oh, well, he's right about that too. and he's right about this, and he's right about that. He has a rational, logical, evidence-based response to all the arguments about chemtrails, every single one of them. And his arguments were more evidence-based than the chemtrail arguments. The chemtrail arguments were more speculative and lacking in evidence than the responses that this man was making. And then I started to go, whoa, maybe I'm wrong about chemtrails. Maybe they are just contrails. And I kept studying it. And here's the conclusion that I came to. And this conclusion is that I can't say that they're not spraying us with something. I can't say that they're not doing that because I don't know. But what I can say is contrails are real. I can't say that chemtrails are fake, but I can say that contrails are a real thing. Guys, do you know what airplanes have in common with your car, especially in Northern California? What they have in common with cars is that they both let out visible water vapor when it's cold and a little bit moist. Do you know what cars and airplanes have in common with a human being? We all three let out visible water vapor when it's cold and there's enough moisture in the air. If it's super dry and cold, the water vapor won't condense and become visible as easily. Or if it does, it quickly evaporates and disperses. But if there's enough moisture in the air and it's cold enough, then our breath will put out visible fog, our cars will put out visible fog. And if you're in an airplane way up high in the sky where it's super cold, the water vapor coming out of exhaust, because when you burn hydrocarbons like jet fuel or gasoline, those are called hydrocarbons. Notice the word hydro at the front of it, meaning water. When you burn hydrocarbons, it separates the carbon from the water, and the water doesn't burn up in the engine. The water is emitted as exhaust, as water vapor. When that water vapor comes out of a jet engine way up high where it's super cold, if there's enough moisture in the air, not only will it form a long contrail, but that contrail will persist because there's enough water vapor already in the air around it that it won't disperse and dry out. In summertime, when the contrail comes out, when it's really dry, at least in California in the summer, then the contrail will still form, but it's so dry up there that it won't maintain its long cylindrical cloud shape. It will disperse and evaporate and disappear from our vision. That explains why they're not spraying us in the middle of summer in California when, by all logic, they should be spraying us even more. In other parts of the country where you have moist summers, you're going to see contrails all summer long. And there's other arguments to prove chemtrails. For example, a lot of people will point out that, in photographs and film of World War II, the jets back then weren't emitting contrails or chemtrails. The reason for that is because there weren't a lot of really high altitude jets back then. Most of the airplanes in World War II were not jets. The ones that were not pressurized in the same way where they could fly super high in the atmosphere, where the higher you go up, the colder it is. And so a lot of those airplanes in World War II were flying lower and they weren't emitting contrails or chemtrails because they were flying lower where it wasn't as cold. You can still find photographs from World War II where the entire sky is crisscrossed with contrails because conditions were right even for those lower flying airplanes, but it wasn't as common. Another argument for chemtrails is that even in the 60s and 70s, you didn't see as many chemtrails. That's because there weren't as many airplanes. There's way more airplanes now flying around, and they're way higher than they used to be. So we are seeing more chemtrails. Another argument for chemtrails is that you'll sometimes see a jet stopping and starting the spray. The spray will start coming out and then it'll stop. And the reason for this is because the sky is not homogeneous. It's not homogeneous in temperature, and it's not homogeneous in moisture content. The sky, we can't see it from the ground, is actually composed of many layers: stratosphere, troposphere, all these other layers. I don't know all the names of them, but each one has its own temperature and moisture content. Sort of like when you jump into a swimming pool and the top is warm, but your feet are down in colder water because the water has separated into layers according to temperature. This happens to the air as well. And so an airplane might be flying through a section of the sky that is colder or has more moisture in it or less moisture in it. And that's why the contrail will become visible and then stop being visible. I once saw this on Maui. This is when I believed chemtrails were real. I was living on Maui and I saw a jet fly right over the island. And right as it got close to the island, it started letting out this huge, fluffy chemtrail. And then the chemtrail stopped as soon as it was past the island. And I was like, whoa, man, look, they're spraying us. This is obvious. They just flipped a switch and started spraying us right as they're over the island. And then I learned about the moisture and the temperature. And the reason that jet was showing a contrail when it was over the island, because the moist tropical air of the ocean would hit that mountain and rise up, a mountain called Haleakala. It would go up Haleakala, which is like 10,000 feet. When that moist, warm air got up high enough into the colder level of air, it condensed and became visible. And so when that jet flew over the island, it hit a pocket of air that was coming up and it had a lot of moisture in it. And so that big, fluffy white cloud came out of its tail. Another argument for chemtrails is that they've measured aluminum particulates. That's a big one. It's like they're poisoning us by spraying aluminum particulates on us. They're trying to kill all the trees and the nature and everybody and everything. I don't know. Usually when you're bringing charges against someone in a court of law, you have to establish a motive. There needs to be a reason why someone is doing something. You can't just say, they murdered him. They were strangers. They had no reason to do that, but they murdered that person. You have to say, why would they even want to murder that person? So my question is, why would some hidden cabal be trying to destroy all life on Earth, including themselves and their own children, their own family lineage? If they're trying to kill all the plants, wouldn't they want their own palatial estates with all the lawns and gardens and beautiful trees that they spend thousands of dollars every year being manicured and kept? Wouldn't they want all that stuff to look nice? Why would they be trying to kill all the plants and animals that we actually need as a food source? That doesn't make sense to me. So a lot of these, really all of the chemtrail arguments don't make as much sense to me as the contrail arguments do. The contrail arguments explain every single argument that chemtrail people make better than the chemtrail people are making. The thing is about aluminum is that a lot of different air pollution sources put aluminum particulates into the atmosphere. Industry creates plumes of pollution. When I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, it was all about pollution, stopping pollution. Now, people like me, a lot of liberals, are more focused on chemtrails than they are air pollution that's coming out of giant factory chimneys. But those factory chimneys that we used to be concerned about before we shifted and started being concerned about chemtrails, those chimneys emit all sorts of stuff, including aluminum particulates. It's part of air pollution from lots of different sources. Aluminum particulates are also natural. We find them in the soil even where there's no air pollution. Aluminum, the mineral, comes from the ground. And so it's not unusual to find microscopic aluminum particulates and all sorts of other minerals in the dirt. That's where it comes from. So if you have any other arguments for chemtrails, because I know there's others I'm forgetting, put them in the comments and I'll tell you what the contrail explanation is for that. I hope you can see that I'm not an enemy here. I'm not trying to promote some sort of mainstream corporate narrative here. I think corporations are doing some of the worst harm to the planet of all. I'm not trying to talk you out of criminal conspiracies, but I do know that there are people who are way cleverer than to just let us fixate on what they're doing without them trying to distract us away from it and get us focused on something that's not real. Of course, they're going to do that. That's just like evil corporation 101, evil cabal 101. You distract people. You create diversions. You divide them. You give them false information. You shame and ridicule them when they start to point the finger at you or shine a light at you. You teach people to be closed-minded so that when new, more accurate information comes to them, they brush it off instead of listening and evaluating it. That's what's being done to people. I once sat in a group of people similar to me. We were all spiritual, liberal, left-leaning types. They were talking about chemtrails, and I said, I've got some information about this, and I used to believe in chemtrails, but now I think it's probably mostly what we're seeing is just contrails. It's easily explained that way. You guys want to hear it? And I'll never forget what one of them said. One of the guys said, we're past that point. This is too serious now. We don't have time to listen anymore. We need to act. So basically he said no. And when he said that, I saw everyone in the room kind of went, yeah, he's right. We can't let you talk because we don't have time for that kind of thing anymore. Guys, we were sitting around in a living room chatting. We weren't rushing out the door to go solve some crisis. We were hanging out. We were talking, but they didn't have time to hear a different viewpoint. They were defending their beliefs as if they were defending their own physical well-being. That's not rational. It's not how reason works. It's not how logic works. It's not how critical thinking works. And rational, logical, critical thinking is a really good thing. It's a really useful thing. It's not the only thing. It's not the only way to know things or solve problems or understand reality, but it's a much more accurate way of solving problems and understanding reality than just holding blind beliefs behind a barrier of emotional reactivity. That is an extremely poor method of interacting with reality and solving problems. So I'm hoping some of you guys can hear me, will allow yourselves to hear me. And if you disagree with me, in a spirit of friendship and comradeship, share your disagreements in the comments and I will respond to you with a spirit of friendship, because that's how I actually feel about you, even if you disagree with me.